All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Don Taylor, and this is our PLP Pathways webinar number 10 of the year. And today we're going to be talking about the evaluation of our personalized learning programs through the lens of the 3 pillars of personalized learning and Act 77. I'd like to thank the Middle Grades Collaborative and the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education for helping support this program. And for those of you who've been watching, this is actually our 3rd complete season. And I really appreciate the folks who have given us the support, and in particular, my colleagues who have helped make this possible, and they're going to introduce themselves now.
Hi, I'm Maura Wheeler. I'm the proficiency-based learning and technology integration coach for the Lamoille South Supervisor Union.
Hi, I'm Kevin Pioli Hunt. I'm a 5'8 journalist on Swift House and Williston Central School.
All right. So right before we came on the air, we were talking about evaluation of our programs, especially through the lens of the 3 pillars of personalized learning, which PLPs, proficiency-based learning, and also flexible pathways. And I'd like to start with Kevin. As we head into the end of the year, I know folks are super busy, but I was wondering how you are reflecting or looking at your program and what steps you're taking as a team to evaluate where you are with personalization and develop maybe some team-wide goals for next year.
Yeah, so definitely at the end of the year, we always, we meet regularly as a team each week and are always keeping a pulse on what's going on. At the end of the year, we're evaluating our system that we're using for the PLP. So right now we're still using the new Google Sites. And we don't have a formal feedback protocol like you guys have with parents, but we hear a lot from parents, especially we keep in touch with our students and parents who are now in high school and about what helped them when they were in middle school and what kind of things they would like to change. So when we meet over the summer, always thinking about how can we best revamp what's working already to best meet the needs of the students moving forward. And it's nice too, because since we've had the PLP process for so many years that we're just in a phase now where we're just constantly tweaking it to best suit the needs of our students and, make sure that we're combining everything with the proficiencies, the transferable skills, and looking at those 3 pillars has given us a better focus moving forward into the school year.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to let we just had 2 panelists join, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And before they do that, I just want to reiterate, we're just simply talking about the processes that teams are undertaking to evaluate their personalized learning at the end of the year. And guys, if you could introduce yourselves.
I'm Allison Gothier. I work at U32 Nice Montpelier High School Science.
And I'm Lindsay Haldeman. I teach at Essex Middle School.
All right. So Allison, why don't you continue? How are you reflecting and evaluating your personalized learning at the end of the year? And kind of what steps are you taking for your team to make any changes that you find would make your program more effective?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Actually, we just got May 31st, a couple Thursdays ago. Our team just tried something we haven't tried before this year. We did a celebration of learning. So like Kevin was saying, via the new Google Sites, students were given an option between a really small conference room presentation of their growth from this year, a medium-sized, or we had 4 like keynote TED Talk type presentations that was in front of their whole class. So that was a really cool process which we've never tried before, and we still need to get feedback from the students about how it went. Administration and faculty and a couple of parents were really excited about it and really enthusiastic, and it made the newsletter right away. But that's just brand new in what's happened and just something we're trying out as a team, seeing if that can support personalized learning.
Awesome. Lindsay.
Yeah, I guess I'll speak like historically what has worked most successfully in the past as far as end of the year celebrations and wrapping up personalized learning was always, for me, the highlight was always, just like Allison shared, a project fair where kids were able to present year-long projects to their families and community partners. And I think I shared on the last webinar about I think it was at the last webinar about how we would have a family potluck, and that was really the way to engage all of our and share and celebrate and present the school community and then the larger community.
Okay. And Maura, how about Peoples?
We're right now in the process of, towards the end of the year, there's lots of things happening. I just got an invitation today there's a big culminating event for an interdisciplinary unit where students are presenting some longer term projects that they're doing, and there's a poetry slam. So there's a lot of different celebrations of learning that are popping up all over the place, which is really exciting. I think similar to Lindsay, the teams that I was on in the past, we would have both a fair that students would be sharing their negotiated curriculum projects. And so that was one element. And then we also would do step-up activities where kids would have their PLP out and they would meet their teachers for the next year. We would invite parents to come in, and kids would be set up around classrooms, and people could stop and sort of mingle and check in. And we would have kids check in with each other and share out. We would have, we would do it a few times throughout the year, but the last one we would leave, comments, or kids would have, some feedback space, and you could write some notes for the kids. And so that's sort of how we would create some of those celebrations of learning for our students.
Yeah, and I would say that that's a huge gap in my program, is having that end of the year celebration. And it's one of the reasons I think I got kind of excited about that project we talked about last time, was developing what that's going to look like. I think part of the issue is that not all teams have been on board with the PLPs. So we were a little bit out front of that. And now I think this is the first year that we've had PLPs kind of across the board, 5 through 8. And so that's definitely, thinking about the end of the year and hearing from you guys, I think that makes me realize how important that is. And I also like the idea of including some step-up day parts of that, where you could have the high school teachers come down and take a look at that and engage with the students. Although that should probably not be just the, obviously the only step-up day. And I also just kind of look at it from a more nuts and bolts perspective as we're wrapping up a lot of different projects right now. I've given the kids a PLP checklist of all the things that we've done over the course of the year, and involving citizenship and their principles and values. And I'm having them go back and kind of reflect on that and look at what they've accomplished and the evidence they've put on their PLP. And then I'm trying to get around and interview and talk to each one of them individually and just have them show me what they're most proud of on their PLP. I've also put a list of all the learning activities together that we've done so that they can select the evidence that best demonstrates sort of their growth and learning. So that's sort of one thing that we're doing. And, we encourage this all the time, but we're also giving kids a lot of Google forms and surveys about what they thought about the personalized learning. And in fact, we're just finishing a unit where they did a small negotiated curriculum, or at least they had a lot more choice in their project. And we had a really interesting conversation the other day about not only about rubrics and proficiencies, but also about, whether or not they liked the choice. And it was really interesting to hear kids say that they needed structure. They needed structure at the same time they wanted a lot of choice. And I just think that's such a key component of this whole program. And I would be encouraging teachers to think about, how do we create learning activities that are not only structured in some way, but give kids lots of choice within that structure. And there's a sweet spot there that can be very difficult to find. The other thing, too, that was interesting was I asked kids about the rubrics. And I had one group of 7th graders telling me that I shouldn't even put 1s and 2s on the rubric, because just with a 3, they know what they have to do. And if they haven't gotten the 3, they haven't gotten the 3. So you don't need to tell them what's wrong. Just tell them this is how you get to proficiency and this is how you get beyond. And it was a really interesting conversation. I'm certainly going to try that next year and get their feedback on it, because they were really specific and targeted about what they thought would work for them. And again, that's just part of sort of the end of the year evaluation. I guess I just wanted to hear from other folks. Does anybody have a third party, whether it be a parent or an administrator or a teacher who might not know your program that well. Does anybody have a situation where they have somebody come and evaluate the program or ask you questions? And I'm just wondering if what your thoughts are on something like that, or if you think that's something that might happen. And I guess we can start with Maura and go down the row.
So we really don't. I think it's something that at some point would be really beneficial to get some feedback. I actually, when we were talking about evaluating, thinking about, we have our students and we know good practices, getting feedback from our students to then inform our teaching and our practices. But one of the notes that I wrote was, how can we capture parents when they're readily available? For example, student-led conferences, if you're having feedback forms for student-led conferences, asking some really specific questions about personalization within that feedback form, or, where are the places that you might be able to invite some of that parent feedback in to use at the end of the year to reflect on your programming and think about next year. So no, we don't have anything, but whenever I think about adding on, I always try and think about what are the spaces where we already are on the right path and how can we then make it a little bit better. So those are some of my initial thoughts.
Okay. Lindsay? Oh, Lindsay, you're on mute.
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have that. I mean, I think that's like a really interesting piece, but I mean, I think as far as, yeah, I don't think I have much else to say besides what Maura just said. Well, leave it at that instead of talking too much. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question though, Lindsay. Do you think that you're familiar with protocols, and do you think that it would make sense to set up like a critical question protocol for teachers to be asking, that they could be reflecting on their program? Because I know that a lot of times I don't think about stuff unless I'm asked a really good question. And then when I'm asked that, I wonder if we could set up a series of questions that teachers could be asking that would kind of lead them to reflect or think about different elements of their personalized learning, and through those questions, maybe make some change.
Yeah, no, I think that is the, the only way that we will, have change if we use protocols and critical questions and to engage in conversations around our own practice. And so, yeah, no, I think that's what will allow all professionals to grow, is to have time and space for those conversations. And I think protocols are certainly a way to structure a conversation or look at a dilemma or evaluate something or ask a question and get feedback in a way that is constructive and provides opportunities to move forward as a professional.
Okay.
I think structuring a question around like the fidelity of, what are, where are we at right now? And is this something that we're doing with fidelity? And is it, or are we just doing it to check boxes? And what could it look like if it was really a systemic part of our culture? And I think those are the deep questions that we need to be asking.
Right. I just, before we get to Kevin, I would just add that I hear around the state, there's a lot of talk about PLP redesign and redoing the PLP process. And, I guess we're something like 5 years into it, or 2013 was when the legislation was passed, and we're already trying to redesign it. And I'm always curious about what's driving that, or what it looks like. And, having those questions, I think, to, as Lindsay, you were talking, I was starting to think about what type of questions I would want to be asked. And I think a lot of them for me right now would be around project-based learning and about how we can use real project-based learning. And that's been something that I'm just feeling like I have a grasp on in my own practice. And one of the things that you guys all talk about so often is the authentic audience piece. And I mean, we've talked about this for a long time. And how do you get that incorporated into your projects? And so I guess, when we talk about those questions, it's what what topics would we also want to see people be thinking about and talking about in order to improve their personalized learning? And I guess for me, it would be that project-based learning. And then it would also be sort of student feedback, and that's, authentic student feedback and voice, and honoring that. Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, same thing that Lindsay was saying. We don't really have a third party or an evaluative tool that we use to measure, or that somebody's come in. We're pretty lucky that we've had educators come in just to see our system, because I think we just have such a unique setup here. So like this year, we had the Innovation Lab Network come in, and they were here to see the whole school. So they got to come in and talk to us specifically about our PLP structure and what we're doing around personalization and project-based learning. Jeannie Phillips out of the Tarrant Institute of Education brought some teachers from Dorset up to observe what we were doing for some project-based learning pieces and look at our PLP structure. So those give us a lot of opportunities to answer, field some of those questions from other educators around the state, saying like, what kind of things are you doing? Why are you doing them? How are they working? So it's not a formal evaluation, but for us, it's a really neat way of saying, yeah, this is what's working, and kind of have that communication about, where are there places where we see it could get better. And it's like, I wish there was a more formal tool where somebody could come and just kind of have that conversation and brainstorm ideas about, what do you see from an outside perspective looking in terms of student engagement, in terms of, like how students are using feedback and reflecting and giving us feedback from a facilitator standpoint for how we can improve that for our kids.
Okay. Allison?
Yeah, definitely the short answer, like everyone else, is no, not having that third party come in. This fall, though, it just reminds me of this fall. So I had a teacher intern, and that was so beneficial in terms of like holding up the mirror and really having to reflect every day on what I was doing. And I had the autonomy when she was in her solo unit to go visit other schools. So like being that third party as well is just as important as being the one receiving the third party and the feedback. Like when I went and visited like 3 different schools around, I had 3 days, and that was amazing. And I was able to give them feedback, but then what I was actually able to see in the schools was just as beneficial.
So, I mean, I think that it's pretty clear that there's not one uniform tool, and I'm always a little bit nervous when we talk about like one, tool, but the strategy maybe of developing some questions that people can be asking themselves, and also maybe developing some topics where, maybe we could say we found these topics to be really important because you can really leverage student engagement, motivation, and learning and proficiency through these. And so I guess my next question is a little off the agenda, but I would ask each one of you, what do you think is something that you're doing really well with personalized learning? And what would you share with other teachers out there about why that has been so important to your practice? If you could narrow down sort of one little, one thing about personalized learning that you think you've done well and you've seen how it's impacted your practice, what would that be? And I'll let you guys can select who wants to go first on that.
I can go first.
Yep.
I would say what I feel is most successful is, well, I think that would be 2 things. One would be that personalized learning, I feel like the component that is crucial is relationship building, and having time to really truly understand who you're coexisting and working with every day, and then understanding who they are, where they come from, what their needs are as an individual, and having time and space to get to know them as a person, not just as a science student, math student, X student. The relationships, I think, is the most imperative and important part of it in order to really do it well. And then I believe that using the model of negotiated curriculum is a way to get at, for me, what felt like the most authentic type of personalized learning that I had in my time as a middle level educator, where kids were co-creating large themes and then coming up with personalized project work that really addressed so many different areas of learning for them, and were real, authentic learning opportunities. So I think the negotiated curriculum model that my team had used for years was one that I felt like really got at the heart of the project-based kind of PLP. So their goals really had something connected to it.
Okay. Allison, Kevin, or Maura?
Yeah, I was just gonna. I think for me, it's the big feedback, like the Google Forms where the students are actually like filling out responses, and I can digest that. But for me, it's the flexibility, like in the moment feedback, like really being in tune, like, and you're talking about that too, about the relationships. Like in the moment, if I'm seeing that something's not going well, being able to be flexible and take that feedback right as it comes, or like right after the lesson, like, how was that for you? What's going on? How can I help you with this? I think the flexibility and the feedback for me has been really helpful.
Thank you. Kevin?
Kind of piggybacking off the relationships piece, I feel like we have our PLP structure dialed in to a way that it gives students an opportunity to have a lot of success, especially in their student-led conferences. And I think that like lays the foundation for our relationships with not only the students, but the families as well. And we have our students 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So by the time they're in 8th grade, we really get to develop those strong relationships. And I feel like we have that piece dialed in where the students really understand what they're doing, understand that the PLP is like at the heart of what we do on our team and our conferences. You know, they're student led, and we just focus on their goals and looking at their evidences and listening to what they have to say about their progress. You know, if they want to change it and can advocate for themselves and show evidence for it, you know, we listen and we change their goals. So I think that really empowers students and gives them a voice and just helps, like Lindsay was saying, those relationships, especially at the middle level, are, you know, the most important part of the job. So that helps solidify those.
Okay. And then Maura?
I think, you know, with the role that I'm in, thinking about providing professional learning opportunities for teachers, thinking about how to provide not only sharing the learning with the kids, so thinking about how to be really clear with students and asking for creating those voice and choice opportunities, but then thinking about how do we give feedback that allows students to really drive their own learning, and how do we partner with kids in a meaningful way to help them reach their goals. And so that's been, and I think the two go hand in hand. And so that's sort of been a big focus for me this year.
I made the fatal mistake of asking a question without knowing what my own answer is. And as you guys are talking, I'm not really sure. I always, at this time of the year, I'm always looking at the things that I could improve. And what I'm really excited about is continuing to have using sustainability and citizenship as a platform for getting kids to think about critical issues, not only environmentally, but also in terms of rights and citizenship and equity and justice, and how these things can be connected. And I was having a really interesting conversation last night with Paul Yoon, who used to be from South Burlington Tuttle, and he's now moved to the University of Vermont, and talking about justice and sustainability and how there's lots of intersections where, you know, if I have clean water and clean air, why don't other people? And connecting kids with organizations that are working on that at the local level, and connecting those kids through their activities and learning to possibilities for their future. And I think that's one thing that, because I'm right here in Montpelier and we can walk right downtown, I think we have a lot of opportunity, and that I probably need to be leveraging that even more than I am. But we've developed some pretty strong community partnerships. And I think that once you have one community partnership, it becomes a lot easier to develop secondary ones. And you can, like, for example, we do a trash audit every year with the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District, and it's become part of our curriculum. And once those things become part of your curriculum and you develop those partnerships, it becomes almost like a curriculum ritual. And so kids get used to it. You can set goals around it. It becomes something you can count on. But it also gives kids the opportunity to see that there's organizations and adults working on these issues as well. And I think that kind of connects to relationships, but through community and through the development of community connection. So that's something that I'm thinking about quite a bit, and trying to improve that. And I think that all of these things fit together. They're so important when the way they fit together, and making sure that we have a good grasp of all of them is really important. I also kind of want to ask you guys, if you look at the agenda, what we've talked about evidence and reflection. We also just talked about this idea last week about this sort of this PLP camps or in-service, and where we would have, based on the personal learning framework, we might start the year off with a little in-service activities for kids and get them understanding our school culture and some of the structures that we would be using. And I guess I just want to ask people, what would you like to see added or focused on in your school that would help kids become better citizens, maybe, or better learners? And I can answer this one. I think that what I'm thinking about a lot now, because I'm seeing it professionally, this idea of restorative justice, and also this idea of equity partnered against bias, right? Like, how our systems have this bias in them? And so I guess I just want to hear what folks would like to see added, or what are the things that are on people's radar that they're going to be exploring to add or integrate into their programs. And let's start with Kevin this time.
Yeah, I can definitely, I mean, I agree with you. Restorative justice has been a hot topic and something that a lot of people have been talking about. And I think that'd be a great thing to add, especially at the beginning of the school year. Looking at some of the in-service things you have, the document you guys created, it'd just be nice to kind of start off and having everybody on the same page with establishing, like, here are some of the big takeaways we want, and here's how we can get everybody invested in this. Totally separate from the restorative justice. I know one thing our committee on the school level, for the middle level students, we're looking more at executive functioning skills across the board. And I know the transferable skills lend themselves to these, but just being more explicit about, or being transparent about what executive functioning skills are, and teaching to them and teaching about them, and really helping kids, especially at the 5th through 8th grade level, recognize what their strengths and challenges are with executive functioning. I think that's a crucial time for them to understand help them learn who they are as learners, and learn these different strategies once they identify what their strengths and challenges are.
Okay. Allison?
Are you just asking what we would change or what we would add to that in-service draft that you
or maybe
were working on?
Yeah, what are the things that are on your professional radar, and what are maybe the topics that you've heard about, or that you think would fit well with your program, or that you notice are sort of trending? What are you thinking about and considering?
Yeah, definitely restorative practice. The students have been invited this fall to partake in that as school is opening. Yeah, that I think it kind of hinges off of a lot of other people's decisions too, right? Like, once we have this unifying vision for what the class of 2020 is going to be like, how does that shape how we help them be these 21st century citizens, and like have a really like solid portfolio plan and go off to play.
Have you had professional development in the restorative, the circles or the restorative justice?
At our school?
Yeah.
Yes, every faculty and admin is trained at like the base level, the license 1 or whatever it is.
Huh. Okay, got it. Lindsay?
Yeah, so, restorative practices has been a passion of mine for, I don't know, 6 years we've been doing it here. And I feel like it's a fundamental part of everything. I think it should definitely be a part of every school culture. And it's not just the restorative justice. Restorative justice is really what happens when something wrong has occurred and you need to repair damage. But restorative practices really takes into account exactly what we all said before about what's the most fundamental piece, the relationship building. So the tier 1 part of it, building a community and establishing, a culture of kindness and and respect, and then so that when things do arise in a community, that the way that we approach them is done with just realizing who this human being is. And so that's a huge passion of mine, and I would love to be able to dive deeper into that. It was, I've been working on, I think we've talked about it before, but that's something that I've been involved in for many years in a regional group, but also here at the school. And I volunteer at my local community justice center on restorative justice panels.
Lindsay,
that'd be one thing. Yeah.
Can I just ask you a quick question? Because as we've been speaking about this, I think another piece that I'd like to see added is student leadership, right?
Yeah. So I can speak to that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
40 kids this year. We had received a grant through Teaching Tolerance. The Southern Poverty Law Center had educator grants, and I had just thought, we had talked as a group, our restorative practice professional learning community, about having students trained to be circle keepers. So now we have about 40 kids that were trained to be circle keepers. We have students that are involved in all of our circles, but now they're at a level where they can facilitate and lead circles. And I think that's really powerful because it becomes, when your peers are leading these circles, there's so much more buy-in and understanding, and the relationships just deepen. So you're exactly on the same.
So
great resources, and would do that, would support those trainings.
So I just had a quick question. I lost you there for a second. When you said tier 1, establishing a culture of community and then also of kindness, is that from a specific resource that you can where is that from? Is that from teachingtolerance.org or?
No. So, it's not from a specific resource, but
yep.
I think, and I'm happy to talk more about this another time. And at the Middle Grades Institute, I think I'm supposed to be doing a restorative practice workshop, and I can go over the 3 tiers. It's
okay.
The triangle. But I'm happy to talk about it more, but it's like a compilation of all these people who have been doing this great work for schools on restorative practices in schools. And it did start with restorative justice so looking at how, the whole school to prison pipeline, how we basically what we do when kids are misbehaving, we're just doing something to them. So instead it's about how what's going on, how did it impact the community, and what are you going to do to repair it? That's that bigger piece, but it has to start with the bottom level of the triangle, of the pyramid, that building relationships, establishing community, circle of power and respect, whatever your structures are in your school. And I feel like that is the foundation of everything. Personalized learning, project-based learning. If you have that component in place, then all those other pieces are easy to implement the structures, because you have really tight connections and relationships.
All right. That's excellent. And I'm just thinking to myself, when you give that workshop, we should probably record that as a resource, because I think that's really important. And I just think giving educators the language. So when you're talking about tier 1, establishing a community culture and a culture of kindness, those are words, those are phrases that I can use, and if I can integrate those into my lexicon, I think that's going to make me a better educator. And maybe as we think about MGI, we were talking about this a little bit before the broadcast, maybe we should think about recording some of these workshops. For example, I'm doing a workshop on hands-on learning integrated with technology. There's also going to be a trauma workshop, and these might be good vignettes for people to record and look about and kind of reflect on throughout the year. Definitely. Now, I know, Lindsay, you have to get going.
I do have to go.
But before you go, this is Allison's, I think, your last webinar. Is that correct, for a while? Because you're going to be going to China. Is that correct? So could you tell us, well, maybe she'll be able to join our webinars from China if the time.
Yeah,
but
3 in the morning.
Could you just tell us a little bit about where you're going to be next year?
Sure, yeah. My partner and I, he's a social studies teacher here, and a colleague of ours took the plunge to teach abroad and kind of talked us through the process. So we will be teaching at really intense ELL experience, English language learners, all Chinese students in a school. I'll be teaching high school bio, and he'll be teaching business studies in Qingdao in the north of China.
And so, Allison, we very much appreciated all your work. And as I mentioned, we would love to keep the connection going and to talk about the culture. And hopefully we're going to see you before you take off. But we would very much like to keep that connection going so that when you come back, you can give us some really good feedback about what that's been like.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Lindsay. We appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon and see you at MGI.
At MGI.
All right. Bye now. And Maura, what are some of the things that, as an administrator, what are some of the things that you would like to see more of in your classrooms and from your teachers regarding sort of improving programs or adding to programs?
So with my role as a coach, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot as one of the big focuses, continued focus is around social emotional learning. So really thinking about, we call them scholarly habits, but they're, so social emotional learning, it's things like continuing to work on instruction and opportunities for students to develop their growth mindsets, really focused on student reflection, because that's one of the key pieces to shifting ownership of learning. Also thinking about continuing to focus on providing feedback to students. I think with the shifts that are made, students need help knowing how they're doing now that they're in they're receiving curriculum in a different way than they maybe had in previous years. And so really helping students understand where they are as a learner, helping to give them feedback, and then also allowing opportunities for them to set goals and really think about, what direction they want to go in with their learning. So those are some of those big pieces, I think, focusing on for the next few months.
So when you say focusing on those for the next few months, does that mean teachers in your district can expect professional development around them?
Yes, actually in 2 weeks, I have sessions on all of those pieces. So,
just hearing you say the social emotional learning piece, another, big emphasis that I've noticed has been on the universal design for learning, and, a lot of those UDL elements. And again, I think what is really important, and if any administrators are watching this, I think you need to understand that making the connections between universal design for learning and proficiency-based learning and projects and social emotional issues, these are all linked together. And the more you can link those together and show teachers how they fit and how they become part of an integrated personalized learning program, I think it's just critical. Too often we see these things are presented in isolation or without the connections or without the larger conceptual framework that makes them much more effective. I know that, if somebody had just talked to me about project-based learning, I would have been, yeah, that sounds great. But when somebody talks about project-based learning in the realm of citizenship and how you have to have executive functioning skills, to be involved with government and to make those connections, and to also then use the PLP as a portable way of demonstrating our growth and learning, I think it becomes a lot more vibrant, and it becomes a lot more, I think teachers accept it much more willingly than if it's presented in isolation. And I just, continue to promote the idea that these all fit together, those three pillars fit together, and that without one, neither of the other two are nearly as successful.
I was thinking about that, Don. Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
Because in the webinar, you brought up the fact, like at the state level, there's a lot of talk, right, about like the redesign of the PLP or redesign of this. And I was just thinking, yeah, because they're looking at them in isolation. Like they're not right, like someone from overhead is just seeing these three things, but they're not seeing them happening fluidly together. So of course they'd be like, this needs to be fixed. But like when they're all together, it works seamlessly. And like, so how many people making decisions are actually in our schools looking at how it's working?
Well, that's a very good question. And the other, issue though is how well are we telling our story about what works well? And the people who tell the story the best are the students, right? I mean, they are the most powerful advocates for effective education, and we need to be figuring out how we can get our students, when we talk about giving students voice beyond the classroom, how can we be doing that so that students can make change? And I think this has been a big year for that, with students protesting at the State House about issues critical to our society, as gun control, or the gun and violence issue, and also climate change. And how do we engage students in a way that makes them understand their responsibility, but also their opportunity for those things? These are all big questions, right? And it's the time of the year when I know folks are working really hard. We're going to wind it down here. And I guess out of this conversation, I just want people to think about the questions they would be asking themselves about their program, the professional development that they're seeking to continue to improve. And also to make sure, one of the things we haven't talked about is mindfulness, just to make sure that people take breaks over the summer, and recharge and relax a little bit and just enjoy everything that this great state has to offer. The last thing I'd like to just remind folks is, number one, I did give you this idea of this PLP Pathways camp, and if you look at that and can see anything that's glaring omissions, if you can maybe do some edits on that, that'd be great. Also, professional development opportunities. Does anybody have any suggestions for educators out there who might be looking for good, solid professional development this summer? And I'll start with Maura and then hear from Allison.
Definitely the Middle Grades Institute. So hopefully we'll see everyone soon. So that's sort of my primary focus. Okay.
Allison?
Yeah, I was going to say, not ones that we haven't already said in past webinars. So just like MGI, AP Institute, RP. Yeah, there's just so many.
I don't know what the official title is, but the local area learning, there's there's like the Champlain Valley Educational District. They have some great offerings this year. They have 1, 2, and 3 day workshops. Also, I don't know if folks this seems far off, but in September, there's a Champlain Maker Fair that happens at Shelburne Farms. And I went last year and it was awesome. And it was really great event for kids. And I would say that it's a great event K through 12. They had robotics teams there. They had all sorts of really cool making demonstrations. And so I think that's September 22nd at Shelburne Farms. If it's nice weather, it's a dynamite event. But as you mentioned, our next stop is the Middle Grades Institute. Again, thank you very much to the Middle Grades Collaborative for supporting this work. Thank you, Maura and Allison, for all your hard work this year. We look forward to seeing you both at MGI and next year on the webinar. Allison, we're going to have to figure out how to beam you in from China. And we want to wish you all the best on your trip. When are you actually leaving?
To be determined, like early first week in August, most likely.
Oh, so you have some time to enjoy the
summer. My master's, Don.
What's that?
I'm going to finish that master's at St. Mike's and then leave in a plane 3 days after.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye.